The paper was folded in quarters, and she held it against her collarbone, the way a person holds something they are not certain belongs to them. The stagecoach had stopped in the road, not at a station, not at a town, just stopped, and the driver had climbed down and come around to the door and said, flat and without ceremony, "End of the line, ma'am," as though the road itself had made the decision. Outside the window, the Montana sky was the color of a bruise going yellow at the edges. There was no town visible in any direction. There was a dirt track heading north into a tree line she could not see the end of, and at the top of the track, smoke rising from somewhere she could not yet see. She had $7 and no place to go back to. She got out of the coach. If something in that image, a woman alone on a road she didn't choose, holding the only paper that stands between her and nothing, if that already has you, subscribe to this channel right now and stay with me until the very last word. Drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. Now stay close, because what happens at the end of that track in Copper Ridge, Montana, in the autumn of 1881 is going to stay with you a long time. Her name was Nora Holt, though it had been two other names before that, two husbands' names, worn and discarded not by her choosing. She was 31 years old, and she was, by any fair accounting, a woman the world had treated as a transaction. The first time had been at 19, when her father arranged a marriage to a wheat farmer in Kansas named Holt on the strength of a handshake and a debt forgiven. Nora had not been consulted. She had been informed, 3 days before the ceremony, in the same tone her father used to discuss livestock. The farmer had been neither cruel nor kind, indifferent, which is its own damage, and he died of a chest ailment 4 years in and left her with nothing, because the farm had been borrowed against more than anyone had told her. The second time had been worse, because she had believed it was different. A man named Aldous Crane in Laramie courted her for 4 months with flowers and particular attention, and married her in June of 1877. By August, she understood that what he had wanted was a woman who could cook and keep house for the boarders he intended to take in, a woman he could install in a kitchen and largely ignore. He had said at a dinner party she cooked entirely herself but was not invited to sit at, that his wife was suited to domestic work by nature and temperament. He had said it pleasantly. He had meant it as a compliment. She had left in the spring of 1881 with what she could carry and a letter of employment answered from a notice board at the Laramie post office, housekeeper and cook wanted. Remote ranch, Copper Ridge, Montana, man alone, fair wages. Inquire, Caleb Rourke. The driver who met her coach 40 miles south had been an older woman, iron-colored hair under a wide-brimmed hat, forthright in a way Nora found immediately calming. "Rourke," the woman said. "He's a fair man. Not a warm one. But fair is rarer and worth more." She flicked the reins. He ranched with his brother for 11 years. Brother died last winter. Horse fell on him in a dry creek bed. Caleb's been running 400 acres alone since February. That advertisement sat on that board for 6 weeks before you answered it. What keeps people away? He's quiet in a way some find uncomfortable. Had a woman once, years ago. She left. He ain't the kind of man who explains himself. A pause. He won't trouble you. I'll tell you that with certainty. The stagecoach left her at the road's end, and she walked the dirt track north with her trunk dragging on one end, and the smoke above the tree line resolved itself into a ranch house, substantial, well built in stone and timber, put up to last and having kept that promise. The fencing was in good repair. The yard was spare, but clean. A dog came out from somewhere, smelled her boots, and returned satisfied. She felt the weight of her life on both shoulders as she walked. Not self-pity, she had used that up years ago, but an honest accounting. 2 marriages she had not chosen. A body the world had spent considerable energy commenting on since she was a girl. Too much of it, they said, too broad. The wrong shape for anything she was meant to be. She had learned to walk through that commentary the way a person walks through a cold wind, facing into it, not stopping, not asking it to change. She knocked on the door of Caleb Rourke's house with her chin level and her trunk in the dirt behind her. He opened it after a moment that was not quite long enough to be rude. He was, as advertised, very tall. Dark hair going gray at the temples, a face with the particular quality of a man who had been weathered not just by weather, by something internal as well, some long-sustained effort that had left marks. His eyes were gray, and they moved over her once, quickly, and then came to her face and stayed there. "You're the housekeeper," he said. "Nora Holt. Cook and housekeeper both. Your notice said fair wages. I'll tell you now I take that to mean $40 a month, which is the going rate for the work you've described. If you had a lower number in mind, better we settle it before I bring my trunk inside." Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, something closer to recalibration. $40, he said. Room and board. Then, we're agreed. He stepped back from the door. The kitchen was at the rear of the house, and it was the kitchen of a man who had been feeding himself with the minimum of effort and caring little about the results. The stove was functional and had been used recently, but used as a piece of equipment rather than as the center of anything. 1 pot, 1 pan, both clean but scoured the way you scour something out of grim duty rather than pride. The shelves held flour, salt, dried beans, coffee, a tin of lard, and 2 cans of peaches that had been there long enough to accumulate dust on the lids. There was no butter. There was no milk. There was no evidence of bread having been made in this kitchen in many months. In the corner, a single chair sat pulled close to the cold hearth, and on the arm of it, a book left face down and open, the way you leave a book when you intend to come back and then forget to. She stood in the doorway and took it in. "The smokehouse has venison," Rourke said behind her. "Beans and salt pork if you need them. I'll bring whatever else you want from town on Friday. I'll need a list of what you keep and what you don't," she said. "And I'll need to know if there are things you won't eat. I eat what's put in front of me." She looked at him over her shoulder. That's what men say before they push something to the edge of their plate. For a moment, brief, almost invisible, the set of his mouth changed. Not a smile. The memory of one, perhaps, from some previous life when that was possible. "Onions," he said. "Raw, cooked is fine." Noted. He showed her the lean-to room off the kitchen, small, with a window that faced east, a rope bed with a good mattress, and a wood stove that shared a flue with the kitchen hearth, which meant it would be warm even in hard weather. She set her trunk against the wall. He left without further word. She unpacked her grandmother's cast-iron pan first, as she always did, and set it on the kitchen stove and stood there in the strange silence of a new house, in the last gray light of the afternoon, and felt, not afraid, not hopeful exactly, but present. Here, still standing. That had always been enough to begin. She made cornbread and salt pork and dried applesauce for supper, nothing elaborate. A getting-acquainted meal, and set it on the table at 6 o'clock. He came in from outside, washed at the basin by the door, and sat down. He ate without speaking. She sat across from him, as was her custom. She did not serve, and then disappear. She had done that at Crane's table for 4 years, and she had decided she was finished with it. When he had finished the cornbread and started on a second piece, he looked across the table. "Where did you come from?" "Laramie," most recently. Before that, Kansas. He absorbed this. Long way to come for a notice board advertisement. It was as far as the advertisement was posted, she said, and I needed the distance. He did not ask what from. He had the quality, she noticed, of a man who understood that some things were not his to ask. He poured himself more coffee and pushed the pot toward her side of the table in a gesture so small it might have been accidental. It was not accidental. She took the pot. The days settled into a shape. She woke before light and had the fire built and the coffee on before he came in from his first check of the stock, a circuit he made every morning before full dawn, regardless of weather. She began to time the biscuits to come out of the oven as the door opened. He did not comment on this. He sat down and ate and went back out. She had worked for men who required gratitude to be performed, who needed her to notice noticing them, to reflect their own satisfaction back at them doubled. Rourke was not that. He simply registered what was put before him and got on with the day, which she found, after the compressed performance of both previous marriages, profoundly restful. The dog, a red heeler named August, began following her between the house and the smokehouse. She did not encourage this. It happened regardless. On the third day, she found a cord of firewood stacked against the outside wall of her room. She had not asked for it. She had not mentioned being cold. She said nothing. Neither did he. On the fifth morning, the root cellar shelves were fuller than on her arrival. A haunch of smoked meat, dried apricots, 2 pounds of good coffee, a wheel of hard cheese. He had gone to town the previous afternoon, earlier than the Friday he had mentioned. She made him a proper supper that night. Not elaborate, she was not performing anything, but considered. Venison with the dried apricots and juniper berries in a sauce, roasted potatoes, biscuits with actual butter, because there was butter now. The kitchen filled with something that had not been in it for a long time. He came in and sat down, and she saw the moment the smell reached him. The slight pause, the almost imperceptible lifting of something in his face. The way a man looks when he has been somewhere cold for a long time and comes through a door into warmth and doesn't know yet how to receive it. He ate the whole of it. He cleaned the plate in the particular way of a man who has forgotten what it is to eat something made with care. My brother used to say. He began, and then stopped. She waited. She had learned that rushing a man who rarely speaks only closes the door. He used to say that the best thing about a long day's work was coming into a kitchen that smelled like somebody gave a damn. He looked at the table. I'd forgotten what that was like. She let the quiet hold it. She did not say, I know what it is to be in a house where nobody gives a damn. She did not say anything. She refilled his coffee, and he wrapped both hands around the cup, and the evening settled around them like it was settling into its right shape. The trouble arrived on a gray morning in late October in the form of a letter delivered by a writer from the county seat, a formal letter, legal paper, bearing the name Aldous Crane of Laramie, Wyoming. She recognized the handwriting before she had fully opened it. Crane claimed, in language that had clearly been written by a lawyer, that she had abandoned the marital home without proper cause or legal dissolution, and that he was pursuing recovery of property she had removed upon her departure. He had enumerated the property: 1 cast-iron skillet, 1 wool coat, 1 silver-backed hairbrush belonging to the estate. He had also, at the bottom of the letter, beneath the legal language, written in his own hand, "You are still my wife in the eyes of the law. Nora, come home, or face the consequence." She stood in the kitchen with the letter in both hands, and the familiar cold moved through her. Not fear exactly, but the old knowledge of how small a woman could be made to feel by a piece of paper and a man with money to spend on lawyers. She heard the door. Rourke came in from the cold, coat dusted with the first thin snow of the season, and read her face before he had taken 3 steps into the kitchen. He stopped. "What is it?" Not a question. A statement of readiness. She set the letter on the kitchen table and stepped back from it, and he came forward and read it. And she watched him read it, and she watched the stillness that came over him. Not the stillness of shock, but the deeper stillness of a man deciding something. He set the letter down. He looked at her. "He's wrong about the law," Rourke said. "A woman can leave a man who treats her as property. That's been the case in this territory since '69. His voice was even. "And he's wrong about the skillet and the coat and the brush. Those are yours. He has a lawyer who will say otherwise. Then I'll get a lawyer who will say the truth." He paused. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." She looked at him. 31 years old. 2 marriages. The particular education of a woman who has been treated as an arrangement. She was not accustomed to being asked what she would rather. "I have some money saved," she began. "Keep your money." He said it the way he said most things. Direct, flat, with no performance around it. "This isn't something you should carry alone." She turned away so he would not see what crossed her face. She was not a woman who cried in front of people. She had trained that out of herself somewhere around the 3rd year of the first marriage. But there are moments that find the place where the training breaks down, and this was one of them. She pressed one hand to the kitchen counter and looked out the east window at the snow coming down. The first real snow, fine and quiet and covering everything slowly. After a moment, she turned back. "I'd be grateful," she said. He nodded once, the way men nod when a thing has been settled, and put his hat back on and went back out into the cold. Crane arrived himself 3 weeks later. He came on a Thursday with the lawyer in tow, a narrow man in a too thin coat, who looked unhappy about the weather. Nora saw them from the east window and felt her hands go still on the bread dough. She kept her hands in the dough. She kept working it. She did not let them see her stop. Rourke was already outside when they rode up. He had been repairing the south fence and had seen them coming before she had. He stood in the yard with his arms at his sides and said nothing. Waiting, she heard Crane's voice through the kitchen window. That pleasant voice, the one she had mistaken for 4 months for something genuine. He was explaining, with the reasonableness of a man who had never been told no in any way that stuck, that he had come to collect what belonged to him. She heard Rourke's answer through the glass. His voice was not raised, and it was not angry, and it was very clear. "She doesn't belong to anyone. She works for me, and she lives on my property, and she has the legal paperwork that ends your claim, that was filed in this county 4 weeks ago, and you were notified. You read the notice." Crane said something she couldn't hear. "Then I'll say it plainly," Rourke said. "You sold her to yourself twice over. First with a debt arrangement her father made when she was 19 and couldn't refuse it. Second, with a marriage you used to furnish your house and feed your boarders. Both times she walked away with nothing. You will not come to my land and extend that record. Go home, Mr. Crane." A pause, and the property. The lawyer began. "If you can identify the property," Rourke said, "I'll give it to you directly. Come into the yard and tell me which one of my fence posts is hers. Tell me which smoke from my chimney belongs to her coat. Tell me which piece of my land she baked into the bread she made this morning." A silence. "I didn't think so." She had come out onto the porch by then. She did not know exactly when she had stopped working the dough and washed her hands and come to stand at the porch rail. It had happened the way some decisions happen, without a discrete moment, gradually and then all at once. Crane looked up at her. She looked back at him. She had looked at him 100 times from below, from a kitchen, from a position of arrangement and managed smallness. She looked at him now from level, from her own porch, in her own flour-dusted apron, with no transaction between them she had not chosen. She said nothing. At Crane's back, a justice of the peace named Gibbons had ridden out from the county seat to observe the legal settlement. He had heard everything. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Crane, the matter of the previous marriage was dissolved legally on the 22nd of September in the County Court of Carbon County. You received notice. The property question is settled as Mr. Rourke has described. You have no legal standing here." A pause. "I'd suggest you go back the way you came." Crane looked at Nora one final time. The pleasant manner was gone entirely, and without it he was simply what he had always been, a man who had calculated what she was worth and been wrong, and who did not like being wrong. He turned his horse south. The lawyer followed. They did not look back. Justice Gibbons tipped his hat at Nora and rode after them at a distance. She stood on the porch in the cold and listened to the hooves go quiet on the road and felt something happen in her chest. Not a dramatic thing, not a collapse, but a slow settling. The way a structure settles when the thing it has been braced against is finally removed. She had been braced against Aldous Crane and everything he represented for 4 years before she left, and 3 weeks since the letter. And now she was done bracing. Rourke came up onto the porch and stood beside her and did not say anything for a moment. The snow had stopped. The afternoon light was coming through the clouds at an angle that turned the fields to something close to gold. "Thank you," she said. "You thanked me already. I'm saying it again." He looked at the fields. Then he looked at her, sideways with the directness that was. She had come to understand simply how he was made. No performance in either direction, no softening and no edge. "You asked me, the first night, what I'd do if I had a lower number in mind," he said. "For the wages. I did. The answer was that I didn't. I put $40 because I knew the work was worth it, and I knew the kind of woman who'd come all the way from Laramie and ask for it outright." He paused. "I was right about the work. I was right about the woman, too." She did not speak right away. A wind came across the fields and moved through the dry grass, and she let it pass. "That's about the plainest thing anyone has ever said to me," she said. "I don't know how to say it any other way." "I know," she said. "That's why I believed it." The winter came in full the last week of November, 3 days of snow that sealed the ranch into itself, drifts to the fence rails, the world reduced to the house and the barn and the distance between them. It was not a hardship. She had weathered harder winters and worse circumstances with less. She baked through the storm. The cold outside made the warmth inside a thing you could feel as a conscious fact, and the bread rising and the kitchen smelling the way a kitchen should smell seemed important in a way she did not try to name. August the healer slept in front of the hearth and snored with the contentment of a dog who has decided that all is well. On the second evening, Rourke came in from the barn with ice in his beard and sat at the table, and she set a bowl of venison stew in front of him, and they ate together in the easy quiet that had grown between them, not the silence of people with nothing to say, but of people who have said enough of the important things that the rest can wait. "My brother's name was Thomas," he said after a while. "He would have liked you. He liked people who said what they meant." She settled on the truth. "My mother was like that. She used to say being indirect was just lying dressed up politely." A pause. "I miss her." "How long?" 4 years in February." He nodded. They let the dead sit with them in the kitchen. the way the dead do when you give them room, not as grief, but as presence. Then the fire settled in the stove, and August sighed in his sleep, and neither of them moved to change any of it. In the spring, the kitchen garden she had started clearing in October came in better than she expected. Green onions and early radishes and the small proof that things put in the ground in hard weather will come up when the season turns. She found herself out there in the mornings with her coffee and her thoughts, planning where she would put the herbs. She had not planned anything in years. The planning itself was new. Rourke came out one morning and stood at the fence. "You're putting the beans on the south side," he said. "More sun. Thomas always put them on the north side." "Thomas was wrong about the beans," she said. "The rest of your brother I'll take on faith." That resolved itself into something she had not heard from him before. An actual laugh, brief and low and genuine. The sound of a man surprised to find he was still capable of it. She looked up at him from where she was kneeling with her hands full of earth and thought, "There it is. There is the man who was under all that grief." "Nora," he said, "yes, you could stay. Not under the current arrangement." He was choosing words with the care of a man who knows they do not come easily to him. "I mean something that would be yours to refuse. I would not think less of you for refusing." A bird went over. The morning smelled like mud and green things and coffee from the kitchen behind her. "Caleb," she said, "ask me plainly." He looked at her. The gray eyes, steady, asking nothing she was not able to give. "Marry me. On your own terms, at your own time, with your own money kept separately, and your own name on whatever paper you choose. I won't treat you as a transaction. I don't know how to promise you more than that, except to tell you I mean it." She stood up and brushed the earth from her hands and looked at him across the garden fence in the good spring light. "Yes," she said, "on those terms." Yes, he reached across the fence and took her hand in his and held it for a moment, a big work-worn hand around hers, and then let go and went back to what he had been doing. She stood in the spring sun and felt, for the first time in as long as she could precisely remember, that she was somewhere nobody could sell her from. She had been sold twice by men who looked at her and saw only what she could furnish. Caleb Rourke had looked at her and seen a woman who asked for $40 and meant it, and had thought, yes, that is what the work is worth. That is what she is worth. She knelt back down in the dirt and kept planting. She was home. Not because she had been given it, but because she had walked up a road alone and knocked on a door and done the work and stayed. This place had become hers the way all true homes do, by the slow accumulation of days in which a person is treated as exactly what she is.